we are talking about having to identify if a land belongs to someone. It is one of the biggest problems anybody, or the biggest questions anybody asks when they are buying land is, who owns this land? So I would like to know, especially from the two practitioners directly in the practice of the land information activity, that is Dr. Quay, and then the originator, Mr. Intiado, what it is when you say somebody owns a land, the basic definition of it.
When we talk about ownership of land, you should have the right to use, to pass it on to your descendants. You should have the right, the full control over the land. Then we talk about basically about ownership. But we can say that there are different categories of ownership. We call, once Dr. Adakwa said in the documentary, we have the freehold concept, which is more of a foreign nature, and we have what we call the allodial interest, which is held usually by our chiefs and families which own the allodial interest, and below that we have what we call the customary tenure, customary freehold, which is derived from the allodial. And beyond that, we can have what we call the lesser interest, Abunu, Ebusan, and things like that. And on the formal setup, we have the freehold, the leasehold, the subleases, and the like. So all of them have certain incidents, what you can do with the land or not. So depending on which category of rights that you have, you can categorize it appropriately. But you made mention of how do you ascertain ownership, for example. One of the key things is the introduction of registration, or putting that ownership records in the public setting, so that it can serve as notice to the public. So that if you want a piece of land, for example, if the Pantan chief gives you a piece of land, and you want to ascertain whether he really owns the land or is still really owning the land, you come to that public registry with either a site plan or any documentation to check. And through that process, it can be affirmed by that public authority whether the land really has been registered or not. And that's what basically the Lands Commission does. And one of the issues that we have with regard to documentation of land ownership is that, one, is that the nature of the records as have been kept over the years have been manual. So at times it can be difficult to retrieve that information, to ascertain the actual information. That is why one of the panelists, I think, made mention in the documentary that you can make a search at the Lands Commission and you may have different results at different times. This was as a result of the fragmented nature of the institutional setup that we had prior to the 2008 merger. We had a Lands Commission, which was then in charge of public and school land management, and we had a land title registry, which dealt with title registration. We had a land valuation board dealing with valuation. We had a survey department dealing with boundaries and cadastral plans and things like that. And all of these agencies held some parts of records. So it's possible you can go to the survey department and they will tell you a portion, this land belongs to Mr. Franklin Kujo, or he has made an initiation of a demarcation of his parcel. Then you can move to the land title registry and you may have a different name there because somebody else has gone there to have title to that thing. That was when we were fragmented. But since coming together as one agency under the Lands Commission, New Lands Commission, the difficulty now is that even though the public sees the Lands Commission as one agency, the records are still fragmented. So what was existing prior to the merger is still existing. So the discussion as we go further, we'll see how we are trying to merge these records to ensure that we have a unified record so that ownership information that we give gives some level of certainty as against what we currently have. Thank you very much.
As one of the lead initiators or pioneers of the current regime that we have, can you take us through a bit of the chronology of what entails a land title today, based on the work that you've done with the lab?
Even trying to address the question specifically, Ghana used to have almost like two separate regimes, the deeds regime and then the title regime. Now, the title regime is almost like an importation from what then was happening in Namibia, which Ghana, through the World Bank and other development agencies, made us go that route. But the fundamental change in these two regimes were basically in how the land, as is on the site plan, is captured. So the legal recital does not necessarily change, but it is the parameters that the land itself is captured from, as on the site plan. So on the deed system, a hand-drawn map would qualify for registration. But on the title system, there are some processes that has to go through, which is through the survey effort. Then as we traverse as a people, what it then meant was that the more technology becomes sophisticated, the more survey equipment also came into being. We deployed this technology to make sure if you give me a piece of point on a land and I go there to actually find it. So these two regimes, the title sense become more effective because you can use that plan to find the land without necessarily a hand-drawn map. A land-drawn map is not drawn to scale. It's not drawn to accuracy. It just illustrates that I have a piece of land of XYZ. But on a title case, the land in terms of its boundaries must be exact. So there's some kind of exactitudeness involved. Now, where have we come from? Where are we now? The idea of the title, when Ghana landed the title space, was the fact that almost every deed space, what we had been done under the deeds in an ideal sense, was supposed to have been imported into the title. But here we are as a country, the agencies were different. Two different agencies, two different heads, everybody doing things differently. So you can actually have incidents where somebody goes to title and then he gets a title certificate. He takes the title certificate for a bank transaction. The bank now decides that I want to go do a search to confirm using the title. Only to come back to the then Old Lands Commission and realize that that search he has, that piece of land belongs to someone else, registered under the deed system. So you had this type of superfluous, differentiated way of documenting. So what we did at the time then was to be able to meticulously try to see how we could integrate these records. But to make it in simple sense, we have moved on from 19 years since lab started, thereabout. How far have we gone? We haven't gone much. So in trying to answer your question, an effort was done. In total, we don't have more than 10% of the total number of records that are supposed to be digitized into the environment as we speak. And that 10% is not 10% of Ghana. That's only 10% of records owned in Accra alone.
Well, that's a very interesting revelation there. So you are saying that 10% of the records in Accra are those that have been digitized for now. I think we can now make space for lawyer.
Yeah, I just want to make a clarification. Yes, under with the efforts to digitization under the Gellis project, 10% was to be digitized. But as we speak now, the whole of Greater Accra region, we have scanned all the maps. All the maps in the Greater Accra region have been scanned. And as the Deputy Secretary said in the documentary, 4 districts are being digitized. The parts are being digitized to help in the automation. But the whole of Greater Accra all the maps have been scanned in the digital format. And we are now doing what we call digital plotting. We've started digital plotting in the whole of Greater Accra region and Western region. We are rolling it out to Kumasi in the coming weeks. So I must say there has been efforts to move from the lab 2 into the new, digital age. And as my Deputy Secretary said, we require resources to go throughout the entire country. And efforts are being made by the current government to seek other sources of funding to make sure we can move to that level. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. We'll get back to the issues of digitization and plotting shortly. But Dr. Adagba, in your practice or in your experience, what have you seen or identified as some of the major challenges in this area? Use one of the mics.
Thank you very much. I don't know where to begin and where to end. I think just before I say anything, I want some clarification of a bit of the introduction of my background. What you gave was 15 years ago what I was. Because obviously I'm sitting here, I'm not teaching in Wolverhampton University. So I left, that was up to 15 years ago. I came to join LAP in 2005 for 2 years and moved on, and I've practiced in Kenya, Sudan, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Ghana now. And we have similar programs across the board. So now coming down to what we have. What we see, what I'm hearing from the insiders is, you could say that I used to be an insider to some extent. So I knew a bit, but since 2007, I don't know what's going on in the inside. I think the issues that we face, some of it were highlighted by my young friend Adele, and if we have a property market where first, a great deal of it is not captured in any record. A great deal of property ownership in Ghana is not captured. I won't give statistics, but if we're talking across Ghana, I wouldn't be surprised if less than 10% of land ownership and transactions in Ghana are actually in the database. So for me, we start from a point where we are saying that all this talk about we are digitizing, moving into lab one, lab whatever, is dealing with records that already exist in Lands Commission. Those records are maybe less than 10% of what transactions is going on. It is just a tip of the iceberg we are really talking about. That's to begin with. And that tip of iceberg, that 10%, from a bit of the insiders, what they are saying is, and I want always to use straightforward words so that it focus our attention, it's in a mess. Unless, since I move away from the system the last 15 years, it's improved. But from what I'm hearing, what is the use of a land registration system where a simple search could reveal 2 or 3 different results depending on when you put in the search? That's what this young guy was saying. If I did it on Monday, I get a different search of Adakwa owns it. On Tuesday, if I put it in, I will get a result that says that Onitiado owns it. If I put it on Friday, and we are getting to the bottom of why these things are happening. To me, the bottom line is that it shouldn't happen. It is not worth being called the land registration system if, for whatever reason, fragmentation of departments or whatever, we can have definitive, conclusive result when we put in a search. That's the first thing I will say. The second thing is, again, in the documenting, you heard me saying, everybody saying that we have 2 origins of land ownership in the country. You either go through the British former system, you get a lease for 99 years, where that 99 years came from, I don't know. If it's agricultural land, you get a lease for 50 years. Basically, we try to fashion the customary, the Nananomalodiya title owners. We have created a system where they can carve out a British leasehold system ownership for you, then you can register it. There are cases in history where you could register a freehold and so forth, and that's another matter. But anyway, you can only register your interest you hold in custom if you get Nananum to sign off that is a lease. Now, for me, the challenge in Ghana in land registration system, because mind you, land registration is about keeping a database of land ownership, whatever type it is, as long as it's legal in the country. And customary land ownerships are legal. The challenge for us is that all this talk about is about having to transform your interest, if you can, into a British leasehold or freehold system, then you can register it. We all know, except that since most of you are land economy background. By the way, I have a land economy background, but I passed through the system before most of you came along. So, but for lawyers, for everybody who know, majority of land ownership in Ghana and the transactions going on, especially in the rural areas, for farming, for cocoa production, is customary land transactions, customary ownerships. And lawyers will say these are customary contracts that create property in land that ought to be registered if no law prohibits that. My question to the insiders is, when are we going to get to a state where we admit we have dual systems of land ownership, but registration is about only one side?
Hold that thought. Whilst we are looking at the question of ownership, we have two practitioners in the actual business of land and real estate, in the persons of Kwans and Jeffrey. So, firstly, Kofi Anoche, so in your instance, for example, what has been your biggest challenge, for example, in ascertaining your title?
Well, thank you very much. One, the search to getting the title registered at the Lands Commission. These are the two major challenges. Like my colleagues have already said, you do search today, tomorrow morning, like relying on the search to do your purchasing and other things that you need to do. Tomorrow morning, records change. Meanwhile, you are in the middle of the transaction, have already committed yourself. Then even having gone to the extent of registering or having registered your property already, thinking that you have a reliable record which you can walk into any bank. Remember, the way we're treating land here in this part of the world is the source of where we are in terms of economic issue. Land is our biggest natural resources. Every person, every nation can boast of. Unfortunately, we have missed. I don't know how we've handled it over the years. So it has been said by my colleagues already, inconsistencies in report from Lands Commission. And then when that is done, you are not very sure that even this, my land that I want to use it for the transaction can be there for me the next day, so far as records are concerned. And before you realize you are in the middle of the transaction, and then all of a sudden your money blocks or...
Can I ask a question here? So let's say in your case, you know, we've talked about the chronology of the types of titles that are existing. So in your case, for example, have you had any disputes over land? And was it a land under the deeds, for example, or was it under the title?
Well, I've had several disputes. You can't acquire land in Accra here, which is more than 2 or 3 plots without going through the court. That is a fact.
So media people, that's a very big sound bite for you.
Yes, that is the whole truth. In most of the lands that you've acquired, the least we have gone is the high court. We've gone up to Supreme Court. We have rulings which are now authorities. Severally, I happened to acquire a farmland. I thought, for this farmland is far away from Accra, somewhere around the eastern region. And I was surprised to learn that it was one of the difficult areas which took me to Supreme Court of Ghana. We had a high court judgment in Koforidua. It was appealed at the high court and over there to Yuan. So these are the challenges. The challenges that have been mentioned are real. And I think that we should not be able to leave Lands Commission out if you want to address these issues. It has got to do with their, like this lab thing, we're supposed to have come and solve all these problems. But I can authoritatively tell you that they have mishandled it. Because you have the chance to digitize your business. And then probably I always say that probably it's supposed to be a conflict of interest. Those are the people that I deal with, because if you have to go to Lands Commission before you go there to go and conduct a search. There are Goro boys around, which you have to sort them out to give you information. Sometimes you can create artificial file there, and then at the end of the day, they will give you a report which favors you to go and take your money there and then. All these things, I think when we move on to the next level, which they are the supervisors of those projects, will not be in their interest at all. And for that matter, we are where we are now. If we have to digitize our land administrative system, I would suggest that we go for that is, we join the private, like private partnership should come in the sense that I cannot kill myself with my own knife. If I have to kill, or if somebody will have to die, why do I have to kill myself? So that is what is happening to Lands Commission at the moment. And they are the sources, or they are the source of all our predicaments so far as land acquisition issues are concerned. One, because if you cannot be trusted, for example, we'll be talking about people who haven't decided to go and do their registration at the Lands Commission, right? But then if everybody is to go to Lands Commission to do his or her registration, go and do declaration, do surveying work, do your declaration. If I'm a landowner, a chief somewhere, and after going through all these tedious processes, my records cannot be trusted. It can change tomorrow. Why the need for me to do those investments? I hope you get me.
I get you.
So
yes. So I want to also ask Jeff, since both of you are from the same sort of industry, you can leave the last one. So in your dealings, have you also had similar issues, or is the issue also still about trust? As what do you call it, Kofi Annan is saying.
I think the issue falls in two folds. Part of it is the landowners, as in the families. And based on my experience on the field, usually a lot of families or the stools or chief have a vast amount of land. And based on the size of land, they don't necessarily have the money to register all their land interest. So in that case, if a new chief is stood as the new chief of Pram, based on the information he has, based on the old traditional system, and he knowing the boundaries of his land, maybe the land ends at a river or whatnot, and they don't keep a clear record of the transaction that the previous chief had sold, then when he comes in and he sees the land has having trees or greens on it, he assumes that the land is vacant or has not been sold. So he would also go again, and if a buyer comes and said he's interested in that portion, assign it to a new buyer. So, and in most cases from the chiefs or the landowners I deal with, most of the time they have not registered their land, but they know their land and they know the boundaries. And in most traditional settings, they know the boundaries of their land and the areas their land falls. So just like I think Prof was saying that between the new system where land is registered in Accra through plotting and land survey, when you go a little bit outside Accra, that those transactions or those record keeping are not necessarily there, and part of it has to do with funding, as the families or the stools don't have that large amount to register the lands in that capacity.
Thank you very much. Let's use this opportunity to welcome lawyer. Yes, so lawyer Yao Opo. Sorry, I wanted to make sure I had the name right. Because in matters of legal representation, if I get the name wrong, I might be addressing a different person. So you have heard a bit of what has been said. Yes, yeah, you've heard a bit about what has been said. Everybody is talking about different things or different aspects of the problem or of what land is. But legally, what is, they're all talking about the right to something. What is the actual record, or what is a land record from the legal perspective as it is with relation to the the fact that land can belong to whether an individual, a skin stool, or a family, or any other entity. Who has a right to own land, first of all? And what does a legal right to the land entail in itself when they say a land record, as they are talking about?
Thank you very much. And my regards to everybody here. Sorry, I had to attend to the source of my daily bread. So I was in court, incidentally, another land matter. Right. The first thing that I wish to emphasize is the established principle that there's no ownerless land in Ghana. And this has been a statement that has endured up to today. A couple of experts tried to diffuse it, as it were, or express their own dissenting views about them. But one person asked that professor, so when you are traveling from Accra to Kumasi, there's vast land, some are virgin. Just take your cutlass or bulldozer and attempt to clear one plot and see if you finish before people you may not know where they are from will pounce on you, not just because you are taking their land, but because you are disrespecting them. So in Ghana and in most African countries, it is now axiomatic that there's no ownerless land. Then if that is the case, then who owns these lands? I think before we highlight the benefits of registration, we need also to situate this whole matter in the peculiar circumstances of the nature of our land tenure system and even the persons who own this land. In Ghana, customary law is part of our laws. And our courts have held, even at the level of the Supreme Court, in a number of cases, that customary law knows no writing. So if customary law knows no writing, how can you register that which is not in an instrument or is not in writing? And this has been also confirmed by the Conveyancing Act of Ghana, which was passed or came into effect sometime in 1973, that no interest in land shall be deemed to be valid unless it is in writing. But there is an exception, in fact, a number of exceptions, but the one that suits my point here is if the transaction emanated from customary law transaction. So, for example, farmlands in the communities, you do not necessarily have to reduce that transaction into writing. Then also, of course, the Conveyancing Act goes further to talk about records of customary transfers. There's some difficulty because the thing is not in writing in the first place. And the Supreme Court has again held in a few cases that the customary transaction is valid per se without it being reduced into writing. And if it is reduced into writing, it doesn't add anything to it. It only endorses what already exists. So I think that's one of our challenges that we have. That's why substantial part of our lands or interest in land are not captured in any data in terms of national data because they are mostly recorded under customary law orally in most cases. Yes, they still practice, and I had that personal experience just about a month ago. They still practice what they call in the rural, in those places, Gwaha and Trama. I think I may not have to go too much into it, but what we call seal and what used to be that which endorses or used to endorse land transactions at signed, sealed, and delivered. And then you see the red tip that is pasted on it. There had been cases where without that red tape on what we call an indenture, and by the way, it's an indenture because it was a special paper And if that transaction is not reduced onto that special paper, it doesn't transfer any interest. All these technicalities have been done away. But in the rural areas, they have this trauma they have this trauma transaction where you may take the leaf of a palm, then two persons will hold the side and pull it. And each person will take their own, maybe, and keep it in a very safe place. The point is, as has been said, in those places, not only do they know the lands they own, but they have actually evidence of ownership. The trauma or gaha that I've described is evidence. So there is seriously no motivation, so to speak, to register those lands. And I think that is something we need to do about it. Because they take you to the farm, as they did in respect of the experience I had. They have flowers, special kind of flowers, if I may call it so, that everybody who is a member of the family or as will be born in future will be told that this is the boundary line that divides our land from Openi Mensah's land. And it will be so perhaps. And those are the kind of evidence or pieces of evidence of ownership that also endure for a very long time. Sometimes it's just a river that divides it. It is when the property or the land is needed for commercial use. I think that is where then, like most Ghanaians, unless or until maybe your son wants you to join him abroad for holidays, you may not even think of getting a birth certificate. And frankly, your favorite subject. So it's the same thing until the person decides to go for a financial assistance from a bank or a money lender. There's no motivation. But for me, one of the most important benefits of registration is revenue. Because people are not motivated to commence the registration process, they don't even pay the stamp duty, which is mandatory. And so it is important for us, and we've suggested it elsewhere, that there should be sufficient or enhanced punitive measures on persons who acquire these lands. First, they acquire income, and the other person, capital. But we will say more about it. But I want to just touch on the issue of trust and mistrust. So at the heart of this is human conduct. The person who goes to see the chief, in some cases, has embedded in his mind that he is going to get what the chief doesn't have, or what the family doesn't have. A favorite case of mine, where a friend told his friend, "Oh, I have a land here." They went to the site, then acquired the land. Then his friend went to see the family people. He acquired the same land, quickly went to Lands Commission, had it registered, and when the issue went to court, he said, "My lord, ask him whether he has registered his land. And if he has not registered his land, then he has no interest in the land." But in the wisdom of the court, they said that even though the first person has not registered his land, you obtain your registration by fraud. And the law permits the court to set aside land certificates that are obtained by fraud and such other vitiating factors, as they call them. So our own conduct, that is on the side of the person going to acquire the land. And at the time the chiefs or the family gave the land to the second person, they didn't have the land. What the lawyers call in plenty Latin, nemo that. They didn't have the land. So you actually went to compel them to give you something they don't have, and in the end, you also acquired nothing. Of course, as they say jokingly, you bought litigation and you feed the lawyers if you buy litigation at the onset. All right, so our conduct is key. The conduct of some of the members at the Lands Commission, I think perhaps it's in a way one may see it as we are being uncharitable or we are being unfair to them. I think that may be so. But in a recent Supreme Court case, that's the last one of the cases, but it's important that we mention this. This is what the Supreme Court said, that, and this is just 2020, sometime this year. It is a pity that public officials who have been employed to manage public lands and administer lands generally will be so lackadaisical in their conduct so as to enable fraudulently minded persons, such as the interested parties, to do what they did. Perhaps the time has come for punitive action to be applied against such officials and lawyers. They mentioned that also. Who aid them in perpetuation of the acts to stem the tide of this dangerous phenomenon. So we are also part of it. The lawyers who, a simple search will reveal to you that the person who claims to be the owner is not the owner. A simple search will be clear, very clear to you, or just asking of the proper questions will make it clear to you that the person going to acquire the land has an intention to just go and commit fraud or other forms of crime. So also the family and other individuals who own land, I think it is also important that we be fair and firm. Fortunately, the land bill, which I understand, which has been passed and is yet to receive presidential assent, has made far-reaching provisions which, if they are indeed passed, as I had seen them before the last parliament, then I think a lot of these matters, perhaps the human conduct aside, which is key though, may be a thing of the past or minimized.
Thank you very much for this very, very expansive submission. It is. Yes, I'll let him tell us about the book very soon.
Okay.
So, in all these discussions, Dr. Hui, everybody is looking at you. Even your former colleagues are looking at you. And since you are the one running special projects, it looks like there's a lot that is going on in terms of what everybody is describing as a mess. If you want to detangle this mess, looking at your internal, I wouldn't say, I'll call them challenges or key strategic challenges. What would you outline, maybe as the top 4 challenges you have in establishing what a legitimate land record looks like?
Thank you very much for the question. I believe from what Kwan just said, and what even many of Kwan said, it's clear that the issue is multifaceted. We can see clearly that the customary sector, as described by Kwan and even by our eminent chief here, clearly shows that they are a factor in the mess that we find ourselves in. The judiciary also has a role to play, because from the presentation from my executive secretary, it was clear, conflicting judgments on the same piece of land, judgments given to different parties. And that is one of the contributing factors to a situation where you do a search today and tomorrow you may have a different thing. Because today you do a search, follow upon, the next day a Supreme Court judge, a judgment comes saying that it's not followed upon, and a mandamus is followed up for the commission to plot that particular judgment.
For the purposes of the public, can you explain the mandamus?
Mandamus.
Yes, please.
You know how you say better, but it's
so lawyer,
I would say simply, it's just an order usually issued by the court to compel a public officer to perform a function or a public function. And usually it is after the public officer has refused to do so or has been unable to do so. Then the order will be issued to compel you, and if you fail to do that, the single word is contempt.
All right, thank you very much. Please proceed.
So clearly, the Lands Commission is then forced to amend the records. So when a subsequent search comes, it will reveal a different name. So that's one aspect of this issue of having conflicting issues. Then, with the formal sector, that the Lands Commission has the lead lands administration agency. Yes, it's clear that it's a human institution. There are corrupt personnel there. And as and when they are caught, they are dealt with. And we have situations where they are, as one of the, I think Kwans was talking about Goro boys. around the area, you may inadvertently see somebody who you think is the rightful official of the commission. You deal with that person, and it may lead to other other issues. So I must say, these are some of the complexities that we are faced with. And to deal with the issue about corrupt officials, your point hinted to the fact about the land bill. It has far-reaching provisions to deal with officers who violate their work. They should be penalized, even jailed, for doing certain things. Previously, we do not have that. So that will then, going forward, will ensure that we eliminate or minimize some of these fraudulent things done by officials within the former land sector agencies. With respect to the judiciary, I must say, as part of the LAP, I was a major player in the land acquisition project, and I would want to disagree with Kwan that the project will be failed in totality. But in some areas, it was successful in the sense that it introduced the land court system now, as we have now, and started the automation process, which my good friend Tony has taken up to the next level. So it was through the effort that the electronic or the automation of the courts started. And under the land bill, we are now trying to link electronically the lands commission processes and the courts, so that if a judge is going to pass a judgment, he will have access to other records and know that, look, on this piece of land, there are these other transactions or these judgments there. So that can inform his, judgment. And with regard to the customary sector, to address some of these, design the project on which my colleague, Dr. Dapa, was the facilitator for the customary land secretariat and the LAP 1, we introduced the CLS as a way of assisting the customary authorities to manage the lands at that level. Because, as we all know, over 80% or about 80% of the land area of Ghana is controlled by the customary authorities. So if you don't deal with that, their issues at that level, it may have impact even in the formal sector. So the CLS concept was introduced to more or less try to bring some sanity in the way they allocate their lands. And I'm happy to hear from the Pantan Chief that in this jurisdiction, he demands photographs, ID cards, and fill-on forms. So these are new methods, which is a vast departure from what we are concept in the customary sector, which is basically oral. So to some extent, we are moving towards some convergence. And I must say, going forward, what we're trying to do is to try and introduce what we call a systematic approach to recording and registration of land. Even though the land title registration law conceived a systematic approach to registration, in reality, the practice has been sporadic, and that's why we have pockets of issues of unregistered lands in the country, especially even in the urban center. So what we are trying to do going forward is to either take a systematic approach, starting from the ground upwards. To do that, how do we intend doing that? We're going to fly the whole country to prepare orthophoto, or what we call digital orthophoto and topographical maps that will serve as the base for planning and for identifying parcels of land. I have been arguing, for example, that if you take areas like Cantonment, Ridge area, down so many things, the place is solidified. Everybody has walled his properties. They have been there for years without any conflict per se. But you go there, most of the lands have not been registered. Why? Because there's no compulsion, or because the frustration can be faced going to register. So the idea then is that with the production of the orthophoto maps, we're going to use that as a base to digitize the demarcated parcels, and through a very systematic approach, record all transactions or all incidents of ownership or occupation in the database. That will serve as the base. So at least at that point, you have a complete information about that area, and gradually then move it up to the eventual title, if that's where we want to go to. So in the nutshell, I want to say that the Lands Commission identifies or recognizes the challenges, and I can say with full authority that what is happening now internally and what has been planned externally in terms of from government to assist the Lands Commission, we are going to change or turn around the things. And Kwan Estate made mention of the private sector coming on board to assist, and that is the direction that the current government is proposing, to bring in private capital and expertise to assist the Lands Commission to move the process forward. So now it's not only the Lands Commission trying to implement its own thing, but we have external support to move the process forward. Thank you.
So Doctor, with my small experience in deployment of IT systems, if I come and I bring an idea, will you accept and move with it?
Oh yes, I think we'll be considered. So as we speak, this the complete project document that has been prepared, and I think plans. I would say, as a politician, would say plans are far advanced. And I think in the coming weeks, let's say weeks, you will be hearing some good news. Thank you.
Dr. Adapa, let me throw a more controversial aspect of this thing. You know, of all the stakeholders here, we have left one major stakeholder in the discussion around the challenges related to the rights to land or property. You know that in recent days, certain other people have been assisting those who think they are landowners to assert their rights, which is the case of land guards. No land guard is represented here, unfortunately. But we have realized that this whole land guard phenomenon has transformed from one of individual, appropriation, to one that is now being used by people who think they are probably more powerful than others to assert some kind of, rights to land. In all of these things, do you think that it has been a capitalization on the mess as we see it?
I don't know how to answer this speech, but as politicians do, I have my own presentation to give you anyway. Land guards, criminal public officials, and even lawyers, as the lawyer was saying, please. I'm quoting you so that I don't end up in court. In 2 years, because Sebio, criminal or untrustworthy custodians. I don't want to go into details. And these are all examples of a system that is not working and opportunities taking advantage of loopholes in a system that's not working. We are talking so much about land guards and whatever, forgetting that there are criminals that, Nana was saying, forging signatures in the office. Criminals that are being paid by the public purse. So you can't just pick one person. If the system is in a mess and there are loopholes, human beings as we are, there are opportunities around that will take advantage of the opportunity. Even further, sometimes it's not even criminal. We react to or we respond to economic incentives. I look at the system. I mean, personally, if somebody comes to me that I should advise them about a land they are buying in Accra, what do? They are not coming to me as a lawyer. They are coming to me as a land economist. My first thing is that if you are dealing with that person, if they say pay a deposit, make sure the deposit is very minimal. And make sure in the next few days you try to take physical possession, put some things on the land, and wait and see whether.
But you see, sorry to cut you. These days, by the time you even go and inspect the land, you will see that some people will come on motorbikes and ask you what you are doing. So you have not even.
So that's the point. My advice would be that that is indicating that somebody also has an interest in it.
Yes.
And the point I was trying to make is that the system is the system of referencing ownership so you can begin to make decisions to buy is so much in fraud that you need to rely on these kind of indicators. If there are land guards over there, are there land guards over there? If land guards don't harass you the first time, put some gravel on, somebody will come forward. Or this, or that, or that. We have created a system where the best way to get access to land to develop is by going through these things and then litigation and so forth.
So does it mean that it's a case where the strongest shall survive, for example?
Well, I suppose, I wouldn't, but the point I'm trying to develop here is that all these things cost money, and it's costing the society, and it's costing the land sector. I mean, I think you mentioned DeSoto's issue about debt capital in our system It's even worse than that. It's as if the dead body, we are fighting against the dead body and spending money. We call it rent seeking. We are spending serious money erecting structure, somebody demolish it, and so forth. The thing is dead to begin with, and we are fighting over the graveyard, spending money, bringing, what do you call them, land gas and whatever, and so forth. And so to me, all that is being said, okay, all right, but since we've been talking about digitization and moving forward to try to solve the problem, because I can go on and on forever, I want to make some statements to guide us as to what we need to do. Otherwise, digitization in itself, I think I mentioned it in the documentation, will be another way of perpetuating the problem we have. The fundamentals are not working, and we need to get the fundamentals right. One of the things the lawyer said, which I agree with entirely, and I always say this, is about customary land ownership and the fact that in our legal system, the guy's title to that right is already there. It's not the documentation that is going to give them the title. That is to say, and most of projects we say we are going to do titling. Legally, titling means you are going to help them to get the right over the land. What we're doing is just trying to document what exists. The title is there. We want to document that. Now, in our digitization going forward, since majority of the lands are starting from a system where title is guaranteed, or at least legally speaking, title is established orally. How do we do a digitization process where we are going to capture, I call it documentation. It's almost like doing a population census. The thing exists all over the place. What land registration system ought to do is to find a way of bringing the records of those who already own it into our system. Now, if you are approaching it that way, first, you don't sit there and say that when you buy land, come and register. Because the guy has title over it in the rural area, wherever. He has title, he believes in it, nobody is challenging it. But registration, land title registration, the whole point of it is to build a database of ownership around the country. That database is not going to be useful until it crosses some critical mass. And in fact, that's what we are talking about. Because it's a tiny proportion that is in the database, that is why most of the time when we are buying land, most of the places you don't even want to do a search because you know there's no record. If there's record, it's not good enough, and so forth. So first, you want, going forward, establish a system that would do its best. How you do it is another matter altogether. To represent all those interests. Everybody's been saying that if you go to the rural areas or the customer, they know the boundaries with special flowers and so forth. How do you capture this in your database? Without coercion, that is, without forcing the people to bring it, but also you want it. How do you fashion that? Is one side. For the legal formal bit, what happens is that customary interest is being transformed into a formal English system. What we find in Accra, some customary owners, chiefs and things have carved out a leasehold. And so the transaction, especially the person buying, has an interest to be coming to register. So you do that. So you have this fundamental. We need a system that somehow will try to capture as much as possible interest holders in land across the country who not necessarily want to just come forward to put their interest on the table, let alone pay for it, and let alone go through the whole rigmarole of things. That's the first. If you are facing it this way, then you are beginning to think about some things that were said in the decentralization seriously. And in my view, decentralization taken to its logical end is decentralization to the point where me, the owner, can even load the interest I'm holding in the land into a system that becomes part of the system we have. If it is so easy for me, for the land that the Adakwa family hold in my hometown, Kwabing, to be put into some record by just giving some names and whatever. It doesn't have to be scientific because we know the flowers and so forth, at least to begin with. That's the first start. We could move on to develop this into developing. Mind you, the customary thing and the laws don't require a plan or whatever. In fact, your interest is already recognized by law already. So, going forward in digitization, and I think I'm saying because I've been hearing a lot of words about digitization, private sector, and so forth. My first point is that we need to be very, very careful and we need to think outside the box. This is not the first time we are talking about digitization in Ghana. Lab, jealous, whatever, and whatever. And my fear is that we are talking again about digitization and it will end up with the 10% that or less that we have in the record. And it will be really meaningless as a property sector for it to be used as collateral and so forth and so forth. Going forward in this digitalization and privatization, you want first, the bit I'm describing, an abstract way. What do we want? Where do we want to go? Where we want to go is that ideally we want almost every information on property around the country to be captured in the data, in the database, whatever form it is. There are whole layers of different types of property information. We want to capture it in this digitization. And the elements are there in terms of the map of the country, the Google map, the whatever. The digital elements of doing these things are there. Secondly, you want a system that is as costless as possible for the transactor to get the information into the system. If that kind of information I face, this plot of land, I tried to buy it. The moment we went in to erect a structure, somebody came to demolish it. There is a place in a website where I'll punch that in. So that the next person in the search, not going to land commission, getting to that land, he begins to get this information that 3 people try to buy this land. They've been kicked out. You see, we call something in economics information asymmetry. What dominates in our land market is that asymmetry. The people wanting to buy the land have no clue about any information whatsoever on the land. The entity that was created, because land is such that it's not like other commodities, it's fixed and so we created an entity where, because we know that the market wouldn't have the information, you wouldn't have the information, you go to that place, which is the Lands Commission or the Land Registry, you do a search. And then it gives you the information. Since that is not working, we want to create a system where the sort of information around land everywhere should be available somewhere for the person to pick up. I think I'm talking too much. The last thing I want to get to in my mind will be that, for example, if I'm in Accra, I'm going to want to buy a land. What happens is that they give you a site plan. How many of us can interpret a site plan to be sure that where I'm standing is the plan they are giving me? It takes very few people. In fact, the few people that can do that, the technical people, need to go and pull instruments. Now we have elements in technological elements around us that can enable this thing. And that is this site plan thing is one of the sources of our problems. You are standing in a bridge trying to buy a land. You want a site plan, so he gives you a site plan that actually is lying on the sea. And you have no way of knowing. And you pay money and so forth. And by the time you get to Lands Commission for them to say, that site plan, the land that he's wanting to sell you, where is it? You say it's in Aburi. This thing is not in Aburi. It's too late. He's taking the money and run. Now we have Ghana GPS listing, where if I stand here and load this thing, that gives the property address kind of thing. I'm seeing a system where if it is working, integrated with the Lands Commission kind of system where if I'm going to buy a land, you put me to the place. I say, wait on, let me check something. I take my phone. I get this GPS thing. I punch that number into a Lands Commission system. It shows the smallest polygon and says that, oh, this land has been sold for this and that and that and that. You see? So you have basic little, if you did that, this site plan duping and thing is off the mark. Assuming that plot of land had all the information about land gas and people that have bought and gone to court and so forth. When I stand there and do that, and it can give me all this, am I going to buy? You want the system to actually address the information asymmetry aspect. Because that is the foundation of the criminality, is the foundation of officials, whatever, and so forth. It's not going to be easy because you have interest groups already established. Yeah. Just one point, in case I don't get a chance to talk again. Now, so to do this, I'm happy that Dr. Kwe is talking about we are inviting privatization and so forth, which is wonderful. But I think I want to sound a note of caution that we talk about the private sector as if, the program we have in the public sector where individuals for their personal gain and whatever will forge or try and do, that's the type of same individuals are in the private sector. So just that you are bringing a private sector without proper institutional setup will not solve the problem. So if you are just going with the private sector is a good idea, and to me that is what we have it to work. But what are the elements of the private sector that makes us always want to rely on it? It is the aspect of competition, and it's the aspect of the threat that if you don't perform, somebody will take your job. And so all these aspects. Now, if we are bringing private sector in this thing, we need to maintain that the aspect is there. What do I mean in specific terms? In specific terms, it means that we don't go and hide up in a corner and say, so sourcing, we brought somebody in. How do we know that is the best? The monies that are involved and so forth, how are we going to, it is the competition between the private sectors to bid, to come in, to demonstrate what they want to do, and also it is resourcing, or if possible, on temporary consultant basis, getting skills and resource and experienced people behind the government sector that can actually vet what the private sector is proposing and so forth, the cost and whatever. So basically, I'm saying that private sector, I'm all for it. But do it the proper way. Open tender for people outside, inside Ghana, whatever. Get the government sector properly equipped to be able to look into this. And then we can think of ideas and work. And otherwise, we will go another level. And if we have a longer life, another 20 years, we will come back and we'll be talking about digitization that still left the program not touched. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been quite a very expansive one, but quite insightful too. You see, so in all the discussions so far, we see that the human element of the challenges probably represent the biggest challenge. Mr. Intiado, you have done this, assisted in this digitalization process from the beginning. But I want to ask you, on a different perspective of it, we have heard that there's going to be a new land bill. In Ghana, we are known for one thing. We know how to draft laws very, very well. In fact, we are the best at drafting laws, but some of the worst at actually enforcing and regulating these laws. So how have you gauged the political will in adopting some of the reforms that you were beginning to do, for example, and how it is now with regards to land records and digitalization?
Maybe just before I specifically answer that, let me touch base and say I align a lot with what Dr. Adakwa Enchi enumerated. To start with, land in itself, Ghana is 239,000 square kilometers. We won't gain 1 square kilometer by being called Ghana or anything. We will continue to grow, the population will continue to grow. It's the same size that will remain. What basically land and all we are talking about is effective records management. The size of land won't change, it will not reduce. All the challenges we have faced in the last 50, 60 years is because we have not organized the record that pertains to the land in its rightful approach. So what do? He's mentioned quite a number of them. Some I agree, some I have issues. But the frank reality is that my first approach, which starts is, let's take the question of decentralized more seriously. Because you see, if you bought land in Pasa, in OT, in the current dispensation, you need to travel 8 hours. If you are not lucky to get to Ho, you have to sleep in between the journey. What at all will motivate me to want to buy land in Pasa, in OT, and travel 8 hours to Ho, to register and come back? Zero. But if you were supposed to decentralize it along the traditional concept of decentralization, the very district in which I bought that piece of land is closer to me. I could start from that perspective. As he mentioned, if you decide that we are not even going to go through any elaborate, rigorous technology approach, that same district assembly would be the one that can help to be able to document that land in that context. It gets us somewhere. It's as simple as it could call it. If I bought land in Dodoa, I have to come to Tema or come to Accra. I'll go past about 3 different assemblies to get up to Accra. This is Accra for you. But why can't I stop by Adenta? Why can't I can't stop by another assembly even in Dodoa? Those are where the challenges are. So we centralize the whole thing, and then we all begin to struggle to fix it. Let's make land as simple as it can be. My house is located in somewhere in Adaman, behind what they call Ajirengalo. I am in Adenta. Let the system of the commission touch base with our district offices. In that case, wherever my land is located, I get permits from the assembly. Why can't then, from that linkage, why can't my ownership be confirmed also from the assembly? Ironically, we are running very different approaches as a country. So there's effort to strengthen assemblies that is disconnected from land registration, but land is the fundamental unit of our very existence. We need to go back to the basics. Once we get it right, I think our life becomes easier. Interestingly, on the actual question you asked, one of the companies I work with, the motto is, technology makes it possible, but people make it happen. We can bring in the most advanced technology and the best in this world. But if we don't have the right mindset, the right attitude, the right way of fixing it, the technology will mean nothing. I have seen it. We have all seen it. We've invested in technology in 2003. At that time, that was the best technology. But the problem has not vanished. The problem continues to increase manifold. The frank reality is that in terms of the political dispensation, you ask the question, do I see that we know where we are going? I have actually read through the manifestos if you want to ask me. When reading it, I don't get the confidence that when it comes to land and registration or recording, any of the political parties have a clear path forward on how to resolve the challenges. Unfortunately, that's how it feels. Now, what do we do? And in terms of what we do, I have mentioned some, Dr. Adaka have also emphasized. Let's go back to the disassembly approach and fix it from there. Let me add one more thing, because I've also worked with the court in short. Interestingly, when I was in my national service, there was more hope that the land system was more driven by technology to move forward. Today, you would not assume the court had any inkling for automation. The reverse is the case. There's more energy on the court side to automate than you will find in the commission side or in the commission's approach. Resource-wise, whatever the courts, which is dealing with about 80% of all land cases in this country, 80% of all cases in the courts are land-based. Lawyer will confirm that he's just come from a land case. So imagine this. Fix the land problem, our courts will be empty.
Wow. That's very powerful. Yes, lawyer, please go ahead. And lawyer, when you finish, you can tell us the name of your book.
Well, I think it's a good point for me to come in. I think there are two things that we may have to.
Please, I won't cut you, but when you finish, please also give us a brief synopsis of the new land bill.
Okay,
Because we are
yes,
very curious about it.
I have it here.
Good.
I think we are looking at two things: registration or recording of interest in land by individuals, whether access to family, companies, or other individuals. I think we should see that as being different from capturing of land in Ghana. If you go back to the 1800s, anytime the government intends to pass a law for registration had been fiercely resisted, even by the intelligentsia in the Mensa Saba days, because of the fear that the state was coming in to appropriate or expropriate the land. But the chief in my village will be so much happy if you showed him on a screen, maybe the information service people, what they used to do, that this land we are standing on is here, see where the arrow is, on a screen. They would be more than happy if you then ask them, oh Nana, give us your name and give us the boundary owners, other boundary owners. We will bring you a paper that shows that this is in fact your land, which is something drones and similar facilities or mechanism can easily do without actually going first to see the chief. So I think reorientation of the way we do these things will also go a long way. Whilst we are insisting, and the land bill sometimes gives very, if you like, quote unquote, draconian punitive measures, that in the past has not worked and may not even work. So let us see it in such that the Lands Commission, which has the authority to manage lands in Ghana, of course public lands, but all other matters about all other lands end up there, should take it up upon themselves with the support of the state, that we are now going to capture every plot or piece of land or tract of land in our system, and then send it to the various districts, give it to the district assembly, the chiefs and the family members and the individuals will trust these, to a large extent, the assembly member, perhaps more than they may trust a Bino representative, who they think is somebody in Accra, in a comfortable environment, coming to grab part of their land as they have done. And they can tell you 200 years ago stories that the ancestors told them when they stayed, even during the time of the Queen's representatives here, attempted to grab their land. And they will never, because that is the most important heritage that they have. So we need to delineate that from the insistence on registration by individuals. So that will then lead me to the draft bill, land bill that I have. I confess that I do not have exactly what Parliament has passed. I understand some amendments were made. But if what I have is what is substantially has been passed by Parliament and yet to receive presidential assent, you have quite a number of new, innovative provisions here. For example, the powers of customary land secretariats. They are going to establish land secretariats in all the districts where individuals may just walk in with documents confirming ownership of their land, and it may be registered there. And these secretariats, the composition normally are made up of individual stakeholders who own land, the private sector are part of it, and then government officials are also part of it, who will manage it at the district level. So already we have divisions of Lands Commission, and they are in almost all the districts. But when it comes to registration, I think it's more centralized. And from my own recent experience, when they came to the bush to take the coordinates. They just told me, well, they'll meet me in Accra, and so there won't be any motivation. And also, more important, the cost. A mere site plan can cost you about 4,000 Ghana cedis of a farmland in, say, Achimodam area where I have mine. So why will the chief, who is not even going to sell it, be motivated to register? And some of them are about 50,000 acres or more. Why is he going to spend about 50,000 Ghana cedis or so just to make sure that his land is registered? There's no motivation for it. So I support what my other colleagues have said, that if the state will just take it upon itself to have these lands captured in the first place and then motivate Nanano, maybe for free, to ensure that they bring these matters together, because the benefits to the state will far outweigh the difficult problem that we are having. And as you said, that is true. About 80% of all cases in Ghana concern land litigation. In fact, when you go to the Accra Court Complex around the ministries, land division of the High Court are about 12. But they are not able to even deal with these land matters. So even human rights courts are handling land cases. Divorce courts are handling typical land cases. Because the other 12 divisions are overwhelmed already. All right, but of course, don't beat me up. But the lawyers are also getting their deliberate.
So, Counsel,
yes, sir.
Let me hold on to that thought. Let's ask the business people. You have heard all the things, the promising things, and then admission of some of the challenges. What are your perspectives on the economic implications for people like you, who are providing another essential service to the general public in all of this, because you are both consumers and as well as maybe retailers of land?
Okay, thank you very much. I think for economic implications, everybody here is aware of what you are bound to go through financially if you are in court over a land which you were supposed to use it to develop. Very, very negative, and it's not something to go by.
Do you add the cost of some of this litigation to the value of the land or something like that?
Of course, when you succeed as a business, you are there to make some profit, whilst of course, when you succeed, you definitely, and there's peace on the land, you definitely will have to add it. And once people see that there is litigation free on this said land, then you are in business. And so definitely cost must be transferred to the final consumer. Otherwise, the business will collapse.
So the lawyers are complicit in the high price of our land.
Yeah, definitely. They also somehow are benefiting. And nobody asks anybody to die, but when you die, the coffin man must definitely prepare your coffin and take some money from you. So that is their position now. And so that is how it's bound to come. But let me touch a little on some of the important things raised by my colleagues. When we talk about that Lands Commission over the years, I have a lot of good friends at the Lands Commission. It is not as if we are trying to but we are trying to make sure that they up their game. They know everything. I can tell you, if Lands Commission says, or if Land Commission should come out to say that we are working hard, we shouldn't be here talking about it. They have all the expertise, surveys, records, everything, they are there. And so when we're talking about land registration and administrative systems, we cannot excuse them. And it is impossible for us to do so. We are just urging them to go a little further. And so when you talk about records, which are supposed to be one of the difficult things that my colleague, Dr. Adakwa said, so records. Whose responsibility is this to gather those records which are necessary for the digitization? I don't know whether it's a man who's supposed to do that. They are the people who have been mandated by law. When you talk about identification of fraud in the system, when you have to partner with the private men, who else can identify fraudsters than experienced Lands Commission? people working there. I hope you get me. You cannot beat them. When they say that you can't beat them, you can't beat them unless they give you permit to beat them. Then they will give you the permit to do so. And when you talk about, also talking about decentralization, it is long overdue for them because they have been mandated. Looking at the volume of your operations, they could have decided long ago that looking at it, government, this is what you need to do. Let's move on to the district assemblies as is being proposed now. And so, you see, the whole responsibility still come back to them when we're talking about land administrative issues and matters arising. They cannot be excused. So it is not as if we want to heckle them. We just want to make sure that we push them to a corner where they will be compelled to do what is right. We've been doing business with them for the past 21 years. And these are the issues which we have to bring it up for them to address them. And so all in all, I'm saying that they cannot be left out. If they decide to do what is right, digitization, or with all the problems enumerated by Dr. Adakwa and going forward into the digitization level, I think it is not digitized unless all these problems have been solved, because it is done elsewhere. How did they do it? Can't we do same here? And I think that is what we need to do. Aside all the problems, it is still possible. It is still possible for Lands Commission to do it. We've been having chats. Most of them, they themselves are even surprised where we haven't done it. When you talk to some of the Lands Commission experts, they are surprised where we haven't done it, where records can be linked to the judge at the Supreme Court, at the High Court, to know what kind of information or what kind of judgment to pass over a piece of land. Some of them are surprised as to why it has not been done. And
So basically, I would also like the deputy to also give us maybe in 1 minute, give us also this station, and then we'll open the floor to the crowd so that those who are there can also ask certain questions pertaining on the discussion.
I think land is expensive in general because of all these issues that have to do with liquidation and people buying land twice and going to court. But Land Commission has not done a great job or a good job as educating the general public. Because some people assume that once the chief gives you the injunction, the transaction is over or is in records. So just the simple fact that people don't know the way as in registering your land at Land Commission and the steps you take. And also, as some of the colleagues have said, sometimes I deal with families that have about 20,000, 50,000 acres. And with those kinds of land, already sometimes the general household care, they don't have the money to take care of. So it's hard or difficult for somebody even having that land and wanting to register it, not having that kind of capital to even think of registering it. But just like I said, it's all education. Some of the information I'm hearing here that they are doing digitization and all that stuff, I'm hearing it for the first time, and I'm in the industry. So I think they need to come up with a system of giving that information to the general public, of educating people, and finding ways to make it cheaper or smarter for people to want to register their lands. Because I would assume that if Land Commission helps to register the lands for the family for free, once the chiefs or the families are then selling it, they could make their money back. Because once they start selling it, they could take a percentage of the sales to recover the initial investment of helping the chiefs register. So I think that's the kind of approach maybe government or Land Commission should look at, as in they do the initial investment and have an understanding with the chiefs and an education program where everybody understands the benefits that both parties gain through this whole new transaction of trying to digitize or having people register their lands and all, or make land cheaper and hopefully less issues in court in general regarding lands transaction in Ghana.
I want to open the space to the floor now for a few questions. The lady who gave us the most powerful prayer should start.
I have a background in real estate from the United States for over 20 years. And I know that in Ghana, you can go to sleep today, tomorrow you wake up, you are a real estate person. You can sell, you can lead people, you can dupe people. But in America, you really have to go to school. So I am a licensed realtor. And even for you to sell a piece of land, doesn't matter if it's half an acre, you have to be licensed. In Ghana, we have people who lead you to lands that they know it doesn't belong to them. And because of the way they are dressed, my diaspora people come here and they are squandered. They are duped. I want to know who will be, Franklin, what's the first name? Please help me. My friend, Mr. Franklin Kujo. I want to make sure I mention the real name. Who is responsible to put together a framework that will regularize? And I'm also in law school, for your information. So, I'm very interested in these things because I'm going to be taking care of my own problems. But we need an institution that is commissioned by the state, by policy or by an act, that will be responsible for making sure that you can't just get up and go and sell somebody's property and get away with it. Because people are not being punished well. So it's going on. Lawyers are included, chiefs are included, dignified people, professionals are included. And people are losing their lives. Somebody was killed on my land without my knowledge because of land guards. And eventually, someone has gone to build a fuel station on a piece of land that belongs to me. And the chief took money from me, gave me documents, and gave it to somebody else for someone to build a fuel station on it. Only because I'm not in Ghana. And I come to my land and somebody is running a fuel station. You see, so at this point, I'm not interested in the land. I just want my money back. But please, let's get together. I don't know if it can start from here. Like a body, a group of people, or an institution or something, put together, charged, and supported by the state to be the regulator. Because Lands Commission, you say you are regulators, but I don't see what you are regulating.
Okay.
So, please, I'm frustrated because my money has gone in there.
I understand. Land matters are life matters.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for your question. We have in our midst my colleague and the immediate Honorary Secretary of the Ghana Institute of Surveyors. He will talk to you maybe about the Real Estate Agency Bill, which is currently before Parliament for passage, and it's going to regulate the real estate business in terms of who can regulate. So he will maybe elaborate on that. But on the part of the Lands Commission, what we are trying to do as part of our decentralization strategy is to develop what we call web portals, public web portals. And we're going to have corporate web portals where we'll more or less register professionals in the field of land administration and real estate. And we will do lawyers, valuers, surveyors, where they will register through the web portal. Clients can go to them, we will deal with them at that level. And we hope it will address some of these issues about these charlatans and land guards, guru boys, and things like that. So that is what we are trying to do to address your particular effort. Maybe along the line, I will elaborate some of the things that we are doing.
All right, so I'll take two questions, and then.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Prince Boni. I am a development planner. And because to plan, you need information. So basically, I'm a systems analyst, and my specialty is trying to help organizations build computer-based information systems. That's what I've been trying to do. Yeah. The point is, I've been here about digitalization, and you learn in graduate school that when you automate, I don't know what digitalization. Everybody means different to do. Everybody digitalizes. I don't know exactly what it means, but when you develop an computer-based information system, something must change dramatically in the organization. If it doesn't, something went wrong. If there's something basically went wrong, look at the courts, look at the whole country, everywhere is the digital, you are still at the same place. So we need to look at it carefully. Okay. But like I said, my interest is in planning and getting data. But today, what do? Fixing records. It is a documentation record issue because it's whether it is computerized or a computer manual, you keep records. It's when you get the data that you can do all your antics with it. If the data is not, they forget about the automation and stuff like that. It's the data we need. Okay. So that's basically what I want to say. I've had some experience with basically I work in the health sector. So you go to hospital and they said the people are delaying, so we are digitizing. The average time for a patient records is for 3 hours in hospital because the place is so different. Then we come and say, look, let's look at your system. You use a simple reorganizing the records. You can use technology to get a computer electronic record keeping system. You finish and realize that you reduce the 3 hours to 10 minutes, and the whole hospital is transformed. Just that. It was nothing complex. So my confidence like that, I took to the Lands Commission and said, look, your issue is just a records issue. So let's go. I spoke to everybody. I even took a room to demonstrate that this can be done. You use lodgement numbers. I said, no, I'm a human being. I don't need to use a number. You can use any variable to track me down. We did it and demonstrated it. So my shelves are still in there. Basically, you can do it. But somehow to take a decision, let's fix these records. I don't know. If you give us national service personnel, I'm telling you, shall use 1/50th of the price of the digitalization to solve the record system in this country. I'll be honest with you. Just national, it can be fixed. Within 3 minutes, the place will be transformed. And it is a record, you see, it is a retrieval issue, documentation retrieval. We need information to work. So computers don't necessarily, computers keep record, but if I don't use it to work, then what is the point? Sometimes you even get the data, they don't know how to use it. You see, so it's way more complex. So let's go back to first principle. Let's get the record systems, the retrieval systems. And then once I have it, whether it's rural area or whatever it is, once I have the data, put it in. Then the easiest is the digitization. I can design a system, I use my phone to know who searches it. When I put the coordinates in, I can know who owns the land. But if the record is not there, how do you do it? So please, let's do the right things and let's have first principle.
All right, Daniel, there was someone from this side.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kofi Aivo, a lay person and quite interested in acquiring land, so I can be referred to as a customer in this case. Let me thank the Imani team for initiating this and for our speakers for the day. Your very fine thoughts that you've shared. So the question today is, how do we register our lands? What are the challenges? Today, let me ask, how many of us have got mobile handsets here? Can we show by hands? Are they registered?
Yes.
So I want to believe we all know the challenges. And if I should lock all of us here for the next 1 month, for us to find a solution. If nothing at all, the solution is at the high table with other expert ideas from here. Our problem today is that we don't have a system. So how do we build a system? How do we build a system? I was quite enlightened when Ni started talking about land issues, and I was like, if every chief were like this, they wouldn't have a problem. So what are our key challenges? As a layperson, I've realized that because we don't have a system, we don't even know how to go about collecting data. And I believe that is what I've heard to be the registration. How do we facilitate, whether traditionally, government, whatever, individual, corporate, family, chiefs, two lands, we can collect data on them. That is, for me, the key challenge. If we are able to identify this, how do we put in a framework to make this easy on everybody? Some of the challenges along the line is, even there's no motivation. And here, the only institution that take care of this data collection, as in registration, is our Land Commission. Unfortunately, I keep saying that no matter what good intent anyone has, and in this case, let me narrow down to the Land Commission. If that intent is not aligned with the public interest, then it's strictly your selfish interest.
And I think that is what is the problem now. If you don't have data, what are you digitalizing? That is the problem.
All right.
So the challenge go back to us to note this, to make things easier for all of us. And it takes maybe the government in this case. Let me add lastly, it's not about private institution. The only difference between what we still calling private institution and the public institution is that they have a motivation to what? Meet a certain results. If that motivation again for the land commission is for selfish interest, as it is now, then we'll not get it. So mentioning private sector, digitalization are all jargons. So let's go back to the drawing board and get things done. Right?
Thank you.
My background, I hold land economy, and then currently I work at the Lands Commission as the head of Delivery and Compliance Unit, but I'm here on the ticket of Ghana Institution of Surveyors as the past honorary secretary. The problem or the challenge, we know the challenges, but there is a key challenge. From the discussions, things have fallen apart because the center cannot hold. So what is that center? The presentation started with a fishbone framework. And that fishbone was linked to challenges. And the mouth was inefficiencies in the land market. I'm coming from a university that I had my PhD, University of Wolverhampton, and that was where, when Dr. Adakwa, exited, that was when I also entered. And I focused on the problem he mentioned, information asymmetry. Now, we have identified the bones of the fish. The question is, what is the name of the fish? Is it a fish in the sea, or a river fish, or a lake fish, or a fish in the pond? When you know the name of the fish and the environment where the fish lives, then you know the method of fishing to catch it. Now, the challenge, as rightly mentioned, is one of database, which Dr. Adakwa mentioned, database system. Now, when we talk about database system, what are we talking about? There are at least 5 ingredients. Ownership. Right from the 1800s, as lawyer said, it was established that there's no ownerless land in Ghana. Now, the next point after ownership is capturing the data of the ownership, processing the data of the ownership, storing the data of the ownership, and then disseminating. When you process the data, it becomes information. So you store that information. Then the next point is to disseminate that information to the public, which becomes the searches we conduct. The officer, the business development manager from DEFTRACO mentioned, you don't assume the system exists so the public knows it and will use it. You need to educate the public as to how to effectively use the system. So the challenge we have in this country is from the first principle point of view, the database system. And the 5 elements of the database system I mentioned leads us to the land information system, which Mr. Ntiado mentioned is technology and people. So please, the challenge we have, the central one, things are not holding because the database is not complete. A study by the World Bank in 2005 reports that, as at that time, our registration coverage over the entire country was 8%. If you started registration in the 1870s and up to 2005, you've captured only 8%. That is where the challenge is. Now, when we move from the database system, what is the next challenge? The registration system. Let us contextualize it. When the first registration, the deeds registration system was introduced in the 1870s, or if it's the 70s, 17th century, it was initially to facilitate registration of lands for the business people, both European and local merchants. Now, unfortunately for us, when we were also introducing the land title registration system in 1986, what was the background to that law? That was when we were in the era of the economic recovery program. And there was a push for trade liberalizations. And that was when, in 1985, the World Bank introduced the ease of doing business. So the challenge with our registration system is that they have not been designed to serve the need of the poor. As Dr. Adakwa said, purpose, a fit for purpose. So one of the key challenges we have now is to also how to transform it to make it easier and less expensive for the general public to use. And that was where the various ideas were made here, send it to the local level and all those things. So this is my contribution. I think there's a third one I need to mention. Yes, there was a question about what is the status of our record. Maybe to also address his question. When you talk about the status, the way I understand it is the quality of the database system or the land information system. And there are about at least seven elements. One, how reliable is the database or the records? Two, what is the accuracy? Ni mentioned that instead of writing his name, Ni Kwao, something else was written. So how accurate is the database for us to use? How up to date is the database? Then what is the comprehensiveness of the data? Does it cover the entire country or only a section? Then we have how timely, how less expensive it is for you to access the database or even to register. All this also touch the registration. Then the trustworthiness of the system. And finally, the certainty that the system guarantees. In the absence of the certainty of the system, it leads us to self-help. And self-help, the most recommended one is you go to court and enforce. But if you think that place too, there's a challenge. Whilst you are pursuing the case in court, the other party is developing, then you must use the individual self-help, which has driven us into the land guard system. So as the question was raised, is it now the survival of the fittest? Unfortunately, it appears that is the direction we are heading. Then last, for me to maybe say down for another person, is the problem is huge such that we need a strong political will and backing before the public servants can also deliver what is expected of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Peter Achu Chikata. I'm the CEO of Millennium Properties Limited, and I recently set up an escrow company, Peterson Escrow and Land Title Services Limited, with the support of the Lands Commission. The Executive Secretary was very, very instrumental in that, and I just want to thank the Lands Commission for giving us the support. My question is very, very simple. It has to do with title search. In the United States of America, the title search report or preliminary title search report, popularly known as the prelim, is almost a book that traces the history of ownership or a chain of title on the property. You can easily get this document from a title company within a few hours. Why is it that in Ghana, the official search report is such a skinny 2-page document and takes a minimum of 4 weeks to get from the Lands Commission? Okay. Did you hear the question? All right. So someone also sent a question here, and the question is that why is it that the employees at the various divisions of the Lands Commission brazenly and openly ask customers to speak the Lands Commission language or show appreciation to them before they work on customer land documents? Why can't the Lands Commission, just as you see at the Kotoka International Airport, install loudspeakers all over their premises, warning both the public and the employees never to accept bribes before executing their duties? I think we might have to inquire from the people at Lands Commission what the language they speak there is.
Maybe it's not in the Ghanaian Registry of Languages.
Okay, my second question. Again, in the United States of America, I can get my title search report within 1 week and close my real estate sale or purchase transaction with a full land title certificate within 30 to 45 days, depending on how long it takes the mortgage lender to process and approve my loan. Why is it that in Ghana, it takes a minimum of 4 to 6 months to get to the land title certificate stage of the land registration process, and therefore unnecessarily delay the closing of a real estate sale or purchase transaction? Why have we made things so difficult for ourselves?
Thank you. With regard to, I think Prince was talking about records reorganization. I think we also acknowledge the fact that most of the delays that we face in processing transactions is retrieval, because they are mostly in manual form and at times not well organized. So what we are doing now is we have engaged professionals to help us reorganize the records. So currently, as we speak now, in the Greater Accra Regional Office now, there's a firm reorganizing all the records to facilitate the process of retrieval of information, which will feed then into the digitization of the Lands Commission processes. And with regard to the search, I believe you're talking about the content of the search and the turnaround time for delivering the search. That basically relates to what we are discussing now, the completeness of the records that we have, as well as the nature of how we are keeping the records, and therefore the retrieval period that culminates into the time that it takes. But with regard to the content, I don't know the American system, as you are saying, but what we give, for the deed system, you do a registration in the deeds area, they give you the chronology of transactions affecting that transaction, from the first to whatever you have in their records. But in the title system, with regard to the 13th principle of the title registration, they only give you the current information, because that is what has been adjudicated and determined to be the rightful owner. So that is what you get, because that's the basic principle of title registration. And with regard to, you're talking about speaking the Lands Commission language. I think basically I'm talking about rent seeking, as Dr. Dakwa said. In the situation of information asymmetry, in the situation of lack of full completion of information and things like that, we will have scrupulous people who would try to take advantage of the position and try to seek for money to deal with your land. So I think when we address some of the issues, as maybe if I will give the opportunity subsequently to tell you what we are trying to do to address these things, the objective is basically to deal with most of the problems that you are facing now. So if you give an opportunity, I would like to...
Okay, you can just outline them.
Outline them. So with the issue of digitalization, for example, what we are trying to do, as Mr. Tony Tiadio stated, we doing physical digitalization as well as online digitalization. Physically, we are going to build purpose-built district offices with the client service access units that will interface with the public, and at the same time, developing online systems. Come again. Why I'm saying, why are we building new offices? Yes. So it's a multi-faceted strategy. One is to build the offices. Secondly, to develop online systems such that we can use existing infrastructure, for example, the district offices, post offices, and things like that, where people can go in to make applications, or even you sit in the comfort of your home and make applications to the Lands Commission. And I made mention of the corporate portal that we are developing to ensure that professionally recognized persons can be given access to be able to deal with the Lands Commission on a professional basis. And what we regard to have the strategy to ensure that we have a complete records in our system, we are undertaking what we call a systematic recording, verification of land ownership or occupation as a means of making sure we have a national cadastre, so that using means like improve maps, the orthophoto maps that we're trying to do. Let me put it this way. Since 1974, the country has never been fully mapped. What we've had are pockets of mapping throughout the country. So what we are trying to do now is to map the whole country with orthophoto and line maps, which will serve as the base for which we can do planning, we can record transactions. For example, Mr. Thorne in his earlier contribution stated that in the rural areas, people have intome and flowers that shows boundaries. These can be observed for photo maps and can be used as a base to document those rights at the rural areas as well as the urban settings, and that will be a step towards having a complete information about ownership, and that will address most of the issues that we have outlined here. And one other thing is that, as Mr. Tony Edu just said, Tony Tiago said, staff or the people are very critical in all these things. So we need to improve condition of service, their work environment, and things that to motivate them to also be able to make sure the technology and things that are being introduced will be effective. So basically, what I can say is, in a nutshell, so that we are using technology in several ways to address all the issues. One of them, I must emphasize, is what will coming up very soon, is the introduction of what you call the GLPN, or the Ghana Land Property Education Number. So every property that is surveyed and approved by the Survey and Mapping Division of the Lands Commission is going to have a unique number, which will be embedded in the barcode that you see at the back of your site plans. So that with a mobile app that is being developed, you can identify and be sure that wherever that site plan indicates is where you are. So you can view that particular site, maybe on Google Map, for example. And with regard to publication of transactions as part of the land title registration process, usually it comes from the spectator indicating the grantors and things and some block numbers. We're going to include the GLP, which is more or less the coordinate, which if you input in the app, it will tell you that this is the property which we are trying to publish. So we are trying to improve upon the measures. And I would also like to agree that the Lands Commission on this part has not been forthcoming in communication or making public what it is doing, or even advising the public on maybe the steps and processes that they have to go through. And I'm going to take this back to my bosses, and we will ensure that we will address some of these issues going forward. Thank you very much.
So I believe the major challenge here for all of us is that we want an improved system of land records and land rights and property management, property records, so that we can make very clear and essential decisions about what to do with the properties that we have. Because without that backbone of having the rights, the legal rights to move forward with, we can almost not do anything. But then also there is the problem of having to do these registrations, because in some cases the costs or the process becomes an obstacle or a barrier to actually executing the full process of registration. Like I said, how many chiefs or families or stools can pay for the cost of surveying, let's say, a 200 or 500 or 1,000 acre land, especially when you have to go through the bush and all of that? The cost is prohibitive for quite a lot of people. And most of the time, they may not even need it for immediate sale, but just for immediate record keeping. And if we cannot establish these rights now, how do we then, hand over these rights to a new generation of people who only know digital information? We have to recognize here that we, or those of us who were born in the 70s and the 80s, are the last batch of people who are going to be relying on manual documentation for anything. Our children are beginning to use phones and iPads right from the time they are 2 or 3 years old, which means that they would want to rely on a new regime of record, retrieval and management, which we have to hand over to them as a legacy. And if we are not able to do that, then we have failed as a generation to ensure and secure the rights of the future, the future of Ghana. And in a dispensation where we are touting ourselves as champions of the rule of law, of good governance, of economic resurgence, it is very sad that when it comes to property rights, which is the most basic spiritual sort of intention you have to the land of your birth, we are having limitations, having to establish those rights, even though efforts have been made towards this direction since the 1870s, as has been discovered. At this point, time is fast spent, so we would like to finalize proceedings here. So, Franklin, do you want to give some closing remarks?
Let's thank our panel. I think they've done so well. A round of applause for them. You spoke like a true patriot, and you act like a true patriot as well. Thank you very much for coming. Many friends I see here, many professionals I see here, thank you. I've been wondering why the politicians are not interested in the ease of doing business index. Stan, I understand perfectly what you meant by importing these indices and making it look as if we're only responding to foreign interest. But the fact of the matter is that since 2016, when we were 108 on the ease of doing business index, we've retrogressed. We are now 118, 2019 and 2020, we're 119. And one of the reasons why we are retrogressing is when it's due to the problems associated with registering registering property and paying for property and paying a tax. I suspect politicians should be interested in this. And Tony, you did read the two manifestos. At the risk of sounding as if I'm calling a verdict, the only manifesto I see addressing the issue of decentralization of registration is the NDC's manifesto. The MPP manifesto still talks about digitization, but also crucially talks about how to take advantage of digitization and then ensure the valuation of properties are done to ensure maximum revenue generation. I think we need this panel to go and sit the two parties down and tell them that what they are saying goes beyond exactly what has been proposed here. Let me thank everyone, and let me just say that there's food. But the panel, and we'll discuss some other issues in the panel individually. Oh, I didn't know. Anyway, so thank you very much for coming. There's packed lunch at the back there for quite a number of us, and we'll deal with the panel differently as well. Sorry, but thank you for coming. Thank you, everybody.